Gryme Cathedral, a Tales of Nerkshire podcast story by Nibrick Stimes. Welcome to Nerkshire, Britain's oldest and largest county, home of a rich tapestry of tales, legends and adventure. The monstrous Fleekin of Snuffin Cliffs, the mysterious Lob Nerd, Charlie Ogre's Eat More Than You Can Cafe, Sorry Cakes, the world's oldest inn, the famous Slotted Frig, Cronock House, the 2,000-year-old ancestral home of the Lords Trebonnick, the majestic ruins of Vero Abbey, the brooding Gryme Cathedral, the petrifying wells of Caster's Cove, and of course, the celebrated local delicacy, Nerkshire Spung. I ought to begin by telling you something about Gryme Cathedral, but I won't. Instead, I'm going to tell you something about the local cliffs, an aristocrat, and a gargoyle that, as far as anyone can tell, has never actually belonged to anyone. I will begin, though, by telling you about something that is not there, but should be. The town of Nerk. Nerkshire, in that respect only, is very much like Hampshire in your world, which is missing the county town of Hamp. Hamp, however, has never existed, whereas in contrast, Nerk has been stolen. The town of Nerk had been stolen many years ago, in the year that King Osborne the Beggar, who is often known as Robber Bill, acquired the throne. Naturally, the king got the blame, as, true to his name, he believed that absolutely everything within the realm belonged to him, including, where they were rich enough, entire towns. Needless to say, he fell foul one day of one of his own jewel-encrusted daggers, when one of his barons made sure that he got a good close look at it and skewered him through the eye. So much was this to the relief of everyone in the land that the Archbishop of Gryme, who just happened to be present, immediately took the crown from Osborne's head, hawked, spat upon his body, and crowned the noble baron, whose name just happened to be Robin, king on the spot. Many of the goods and places that Osborne had taken during his short and nasty reign were thus restored to the people to whom they belonged by good King Robin II. But not Nerk, as despite the efforts and lengthy reign of Robin and his gay retinue, as his court was known, it could not be found. Rumour had it that Osborne had sold it to some cackling, hand-rubbing devils from dark and sinister foreign lands, and that they had spirited it and its unfortunate habitants away, never to be seen again. But that is another story for another day. Today, we will concern ourselves with the local cliffs. Snuffin Cliffs. A strange name, isn't it? The name is a contraction of Snuff Man's Cliffs, which is a medieval way of saying Dead Man's Cliffs. These days, it is widely and very commercially thought that they were given the name on account of the creatures that live there, or at least the mythology of them. The last reported sighting of one was in 1937, and that by a lady who had recently lost her young son in the area. Previous to that, most sightings were put down to drunkenness, intoxication, religious hysteria, or just pure legend. Even the church seemed to have lost interest in them of late, as it has dragged itself away from notions of truth of which it could no longer convince people, and steered a more subtle course into truths dressed more in present-day clothes. Of course, the rugged cliffs presented a danger to shipping both past and present, and many lives have been lost upon them, particularly as they stretch from 5 miles down the coast just north of Cluttock, up to and forming the north bank of the entrance to the River Silt and its ancient shipping lanes. There is also a kind of natural swirling well beneath the cliffs, in which flotsam, including the remains of those lost at sea, tends to congregate. Then there's the suicides and the accidents. However, the former have tended to be fairly rare in relation to the manner of all the other, mostly nautical deaths that the cliffs have claimed, with no more than 3 a year at the very most over their recorded history. The creatures themselves, which form a rather lucrative strand of local repute income, are known as Fleekin. They are said to be child-sized humanoid creatures with 3-fingered webbed claws, large round heads, staring bulbous eyes, wide, toothy, almost skeletal mouths, with loose, ragged lips and retrousse noses. They have shaggy hair, are usually depicted wearing a shroud-like shabby dress, which in most local merchandise has a Quaker-style collar. There is great debate locally as to whether they have wings. That they can levitate is beyond question, though some authorities say that they have large wings like seabirds that are integral to the elbow but beyond which the forearm operates normally. The general and more traditional strand of this argument, however, is that they levitate, as there has never been a reported sighting of one with wings, and few ancient depictions, but plenty of levitatees. They are said to be flesh-eaters, more scavengers than murderers, waiting on the cliffs for the remains of any unfortunate to appear, and then taking them to their lair in the caves beneath the cliffs and consuming them. It is said that they will not eat female flesh, but retrieve the bodies of women who have passed away untended and bury them honourably at a place called solemn graves. Nor will they eat the flesh of any Trebonnick family member. Many years ago, legend has it, the creatures lived fairly peacefully in cliffs right around the shores of this isle. No more a terror to people than any other of nature's scavengers. However, as it grew powerful, the church is said to have hunted them down and cleansed the land of what they regarded as their heathen filth. What remained of them were given refuge in the extensive and perilous caves of Snuffin Cliffs by Lord Thomas Charles Spingo, 22nd Lord Trebonnick, in 1645, at the height of the church-driven witch hysteria. He was, for good reason, no friend of the church, and he did this because he had, for reasons which should be gone into another time, befriended one of them, an outcast who used to come and visit him in his room at night. It is legended thus that Thomas was a vampire. He was, however, nothing of the sort, just a kind soul who would see no harm come to anyone. He protected the Fleecan on his own ancient land when everyone else wanted to kill them. For this kindness, every Trebonnick and those that they hold dear is said to be safe from their scavenging nature. Oh, and there is a beautiful dodecagonical late Plantagenet lighthouse, a massively ambitious and astoundingly successful project at the time. In the copy of an old red-bricked striped Roman design, it was begun by Richard Henry, the 19th Lord Trebonnick, and completed nearly 40 years later by his grandson, Edward. It is situated about 600 yards offshore on a big, ugly, and viciously serrated rock. So much for the cliffs. The aristocrat, if you haven't already guessed, is a member of the Trebonnick family, who have ruled Nerkshire with an absolute power for over 1,000 years. Only the king, and then only in wartime, had any authority over the Lord Trebonnick in his own lands. The lord and his family were just and fair, and fiercely loved by every true Nerk. The Lord Trebonnick, around which this particular story unfolds, happens to be the late father of the current incumbent, and his name is Lord Bernick Trebonnick, 36th Lord Protector of Nerkshire. He lives, of course, in his ancient ancestral seat of Cronock House, a solid, solemn, granite-built, terrifying maze of rooms and corridors in the Gothic style, designed to awe and intimidate, and in which every Trebonnick has lived since it was built over 800 years ago. One morning, he just happened to be out walking his pet toad, Mullop. Toads in Nerkshire grow to the size of giant tortoises and are rather sociable creatures who can be taught to communicate by a very basic sign language. As he rounded the north wing, something caught his eye, as if a bird had flown quickly past, and he looked up. His gaze settled immediately upon an empty space that should have contained a gargoyle. Lord Bernick caught his breath. The gargoyle was missing. The gargoyle was missing. There had been a legend about this particular thing that had been incorporated into Cronock House when the north wing had been added, built with stone reclaimed from a collapsed part of Vero Abbey. The legend stated that if the gargoyle ever left the grounds of Cronock House, then the Trebonnick family, and along with them the county of Nerkshire, would fall. Now Lord Bernick, being a straightforward and practical sort, like most Trebonnicks were, had never fully believed in legends and superstition, but Mullop, however, did. Dropping onto his ample tummy and balancing there for a few moments, he signed with both hands that they should get looking for the missing carving. Lord Bernick agreed, though he was more concerned about how it had been detached from the house, and by whom. Having satisfied himself that the thing had not simply fallen off or been struck by lightning, not that there had been any, Lord Bernick sent Mullop off to get whatever creatures he could communicate with to search the grounds. He then made his way to the main hall and pummeled the ancient and venerable Tibetan cylindrical bell that had been given to the family many centuries ago. It was a peculiar instrument, as however irregularly you hit it, its tone always settled into an ordered series of notes. It summoned the staff and servants. Lord Bernick explained to them what had happened. He tried to play the whole thing down amid a chorus of muffled gasps, genuflections, mutterings of disbelief and other such superstitious nonsense, but tasked them all nonetheless with searching for the errant sculpture. He then retired to his library and selected 3 books that would remind him exactly what he was dealing with. The first, a rather plain volume, published around the end of the long reign of Queen Victoria, entitled Ghosts, Myths and Legends of Nerkshire. The second volume was an old hand-bound book dated 1540, and the third, a large leather-bound handmade book with silver corners and a metal lock that nobody had ever been able to open. To be continued.